now look at Grice's conversational maxims. In social science studies generally, and linguistics specifically, the cooperative principle by Grice describes how people interact with one another. Make your contribution such as it is required at the stage at which it occurs by the accepted purpose or direction of the talk exchange in which you are engaged. And this is the essence of his conversational maxim. So, conversations are cooperative events. We want to cooperate with each other. Without cooperation, interaction would be chaotic, and there would be no reason to communicate. And Grice's maxims are the minimal agreements needed to interact. These are the so-called rules of conversation. So, the basic principles, as mentioned earlier on. Make your conversational contribution such as required at the stage at which it occurs by the accepted purpose or direction of the talk exchange in which you are engaged. And the essence of this principle is that when we communicate with each other, we wish to be successful. That is, we try to make sense of what is communicated. In other words, we as speakers try to contribute meaningful, productive utterances to further the conversation. It then follows that, as listeners, we assume that our conversational partners are doing the same thing. Now, you can think of reasons why someone might be uncooperative in conversation. Maybe they're being interrogated for information and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to give up the information. Or maybe they hate the person they're talking to. Or maybe the person is just crazy. But in the vast majority of conversations, it's safe to assume that both participants are trying to be cooperative. Violating maxims. When a maxim is violated, meanings are affected. There's some form of implicature. It's how we can say things without really saying them. Syntactic and semantic rules, which we've looked at in the other video tutorials, are not enough to explain how all of our sentences convey meaning. We also need to have pragmatic understanding. Because when a maxim is violated, we assume that the person could have fulfilled the maxim but chose not to, and therefore we look for some kind of reason. The assumption that the cooperative principle actually holds explains two things. First of all, it explains why speech errors are often ignored or go unnoticed in conversation. Because as long as the meaning that the speaker is trying to get across is clear, the listener usually gives them the benefit of the doubt. So focus is on the meaning. It also explains why we can find meaning in statements which on the surface seem ridiculous, untrue, or even unrelated. But we understand what is being said. So rather than assuming that our conversational partner is lying, crazy, or speaking at random, we assume they're trying to get across some kind of meaning, and that we can figure out what that meaning is. Now, there are several reasons why a speaker might break one of the rules, one of the maxims. One instance is that a speaker might break the maxim of quality if they really are trying to deceive the listener. But this would obviously be violating the cooperative principle. Looking at each of the maxims separately, the maxim of quantity is where one tries to be as informative as one possibly can and give as much information as is needed and no more. So make your contribution neither more nor less than is required, and make your contribution as informative as is required for the current purposes of the exchange. Do not make your contribution more informative than required. Imagine the situation here. This is a violation where a conversation on a train. Person A, you sit in a compartment. The person opposite says, "Are you travelling far today?" And you answer, "Yes." What are you therefore implying by violating this quantity? Could be that you actually don't want to speak to the person. Alternatively, you could have the opposite situation. You ask somebody, are you travelling far today? And they give you a 4-minute spiel about something, and you think, whoa, too much information. So how much quantity is good? Is it so that in northern Sweden the quantity is of a less amount than southern Sweden, or perhaps in continental Europe? Now we look at the maxim of quality. The maxim of quality is where one tries to be truthful and doesn't give information that is false or that is not supported by evidence. So you try to make your contribution one that is true. Do not say what you believe to be false. Do not say that for which you lack evidence. So imagine this situation. Your partner comes home after a haircut and then asks you what you think about their hair, and you answer, it looks great, or it looks very comfortable, or do you dare say, ouch, bet you wish it was yesterday? So you might violate the maxim of quality here, depending upon the situation. Here is another example of a violation of the maxim of quality. Elizabeth says, a lot of people are depending on you. Meredith answers, thanks, that really takes the pressure off. So the quality is violated because knowing that a lot of people are depending on you does not in fact take the pressure off. Meredith is saying something obviously untrue. The implication is that by saying something clearly untrue, Meredith is implying that the opposite is true. It's a form of sarcasm. The true meaning being expressed here is probably more like, thanks, that really puts a lot of pressure on me, and perhaps by extension, stop pressuring me. Looking at the maxim of relation, this maxim is about being relevant. Abrupt changes in topics. For example, if we were gossiping about a mutual friend and suddenly I say cars are wonderful, it could be because that friend is just behind you and I don't want for you to be in an awkward situation, so I change the subject. So more violations of the maxim of relation. Meredith asks, you really love me? And John says, I like Ferris wheels and college football and things that go real fast. So John is changing the topic. The implication, either John doesn't want to respond to Meredith, perhaps he has problems discussing his feelings, or perhaps the answer is no. Let us look at the maxim of manner. Be transparent, avoid obscurity of expression, avoid ambiguity, and be orderly. Violating the maxim of manner, let's look at a few. So, the woman died and was hit by lightning. Does that strike you as being a bit strange? Is it orderly? The woman died and was hit by lightning. So this is a bit obscure in meaning. Well, or alternatively, God really didn't like this woman, and first of all she died, and then after that she was hit by lightning. So, violation of the maxim of manner. And here's another example. Simon says, when are you coming home? Elizabeth, she answers, I will codify that question to my superiors and respond at such a time as an adequate answer is preferable. So here, Elizabeth, wouldn't you say, is using unnecessarily complicated and confusing words and constructions? And the implication here is that Elizabeth doesn't know or doesn't wish to give an answer to the question. There are some additional maxims which have been suggested by others too. There's the politeness maxim, where the speaker must not be offensive, vulgar, or rude. And also the morality maxim, where the speaker doesn't repeat, ask for privileged information, or do a thing which they ought not to. These have not been included so very much in linguistic research, but they are up and forthcoming. So why do we flout or violate maxims. Flouting or violating maxims to create implications can be a powerful and creative way to get across a point. Why imply instead of just saying what we mean, you might ask? It's because implication can get across a great deal of meaning with relatively little actual speech. Thinking of what you want to get across and interpreting what other people have said seems to take, well, it's much quicker than the relatively slow process of actually verbalizing all the necessary sounds. So saying a little while implying a lot is a way to avoid a phonological bottleneck, a phonological traffic jam, and consequently we can communicate more efficiently. Of course, we're not always saving time. Sometimes these violations of the maxims, they're creative. And without this capacity to draw inferences and understand implications, we wouldn't be able to use the neat stuff like sarcasm and metaphor and hyperbole. But in order for us to be able to be sarcastic and to have irony and stuff, is if we assume that speakers are being cooperative even when they are saying things which are on the surface untrue or irrelevant or ambiguous or unclear. There is criticism of these maxims of conversation, mainly because there's lots of overlap of maxims and it's not always clear-cut which maxim is being violated. For example, in this conversational exchange where John says, "Are you done yet?" and Meredith says, "Well, let's see. I've had to deal with 7 near-catastrophic systems failures in the last 4 hours. Elizabeth dragged me to 4 different useless meetings, and someone replaced my regular coffee with decaf, so I'm only just getting caffeine in my system, and I still have to track down whoever did it and slowly eviscerate them, which is a little higher on my to-do list at the moment than fixing your stupid computer. So no, I'm not done yet, actually." Jeez, a simple no would have sufficed. So, in this case, is this a quantity violation? Too much information? But it could also be argued that it's a violation of relation, since the extra information Meredith volunteers is largely irrelevant to the question that John asked. Furthermore, you could argue that this lengthy tirade violates the maxim of manner, since it's unnecessarily wordy. And it's also probable that Meredith is exaggerating about the level of seriousness of the system's failures and about killing that guy, so a quality violation is also likely. Nevertheless, despite this, the conversational maxims do go about providing some kind of background to how we can converse and how we understand each other.